Hello, everyone. This is the RF Factor podcast. It's episode 11 with Pete Gagliardi and me, Ray Gadetti. Hey, folks, before we begin tonight's cast, I want to take a moment to direct you to the RF Factor website. It's available at www.rffactor.com. There, you're going to be able to find curated content related to not only this podcast, the RF Factor, but also the In the Chill of the Night podcast. Now, you're also going to be able to find written content that Pete and I have been generating that focus on thought leadership, while at the same time highlighting the tremendous work that our unsung heroes do every day toward advancing the values of character, truth, and certainly justice. So please make sure you register at that website so you can receive updates from us. Now, you can also find our RF Factor podcast on those popular streaming devices that people utilize. So search for us there as well. Hey, Pete, how are you doing tonight?
Good, Ray. How you doing? Hey, maybe we'll just take a minute to remind everybody about what the letters RF stand for in the RF factor. It stands for relentless follow-up. And as you well know, it's a key factor in trying to implement any new policies and programs within any organization. And relentless follow-up is usually the most difficult thing to sustain. It involves, looking in that rearview mirror every couple of seconds, seeing that the new policies and procedures you put in place 6 months ago, a year ago, 5 years ago are still standing.
Good point.
And most importantly, they're still being adhered to and performing as you expected them to perform. So what we try to do in every episode here is ferret out key leadership principles from the experiences of our guests and discuss how they can positively impact change for the better.
Hey, Pete, thank you for that description. It's important that we remind ourselves of the value of a follow-up. So in the next few days, we're going to hit, and it's, I can't believe it because it seems like yesterday, the 20th anniversary of 9/11, and those tragic events, and certainly the lessons learned in the wake of that terrorist attack should always be on our minds. But as you know, they'll always be at the core of the RF factor because preparedness requires innovation, leadership, and, as you just described, relentless follow-up. And of course, the unsung heroes to put that stuff into motion here. Look, tonight we're going to be recording episode 11. And we're fortunate enough to have Pete Fercelli, a senior law enforcement executive, as our guest. Now, Pete's no stranger to our podcasting. In fact, a few months ago, he was a guest on In the Chill of the Night, episode number 6, where he discussed, and it was a great way he did it. He discussed his investigation into the sex, money, murder street gang out of New York. But we brought him on tonight because Pete was there that fateful day. And when I say there, he was at Ground Zero. And he agreed to come on to our show tonight and provide us an accounting of what he experienced that day. The horrible things he saw, the dangers he faced, and most importantly, the lessons he learned about hope, resilience, and unity that he still carries with him today. Now, leadership comes in many shapes and sizes, and it rears its head in times of crisis, but also in times of peace. It's not about popularity. It's about courage to face the unknown, and certainly inspire positivity. Pete is one of those courageous leaders. Looking forward to hearing from him tonight about his accounting and what he's learned or how he's put that in place over the last 20 years in terms of strength and wellness and leadership. So let's bring Pete on. Pete, how are you, sir? Good evening. Thanks for coming back on the show.
Pleasure to be here with you guys.
Yes.
How you doing, Pete?
It's good, Pete. Always good to see you, my friend.
It is, my friend. It is.
Yes. So, our first show was kind of upbeat, right? Because we were jumping right into catching cops, and we're talking about cops and robbers and catching bad guys. And then I just did an intro that is sort of solemn in nature. But I think you have a story to tell because we've, sort of scratched around the edges on that. And maybe you could start with that day, September 11th.
Sure.
Where you were supposed to be and where you ended up.
I absolutely happy to talk about it. But I think for me to accurately tell the story of September 10th, I got to start with September 11th. I got to start with September 10th.
Right.
I had left the New York City Police Department. I was a homicide detective during a particularly violent time in New York City's history. So with that came a lot of overtime. I had left the New York City Police Department to become an ATF agent. And I took a substantial pay cut coming on board. So what had happened was on September 10th, my wife and I had a somewhat of a heated conversation because we had to tighten our belts. Never a comfortable situation to be in. And, in doing that, we had, like I said, we had a bit of an argument. And normally our routine was we gave each other a kiss goodnight. And before I would go to work, I would always give a kiss goodbye. I think that's what most cops do. But, again, we were fighting over bills and money. So on September 10th, I went to bed angry. There was no kiss goodnight. September 11th, on that morning, I got up, went downstairs, got in the car and began to go into work. I had a desk at the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York, which is about a quarter of a mile from Ground Zero. So I was actually heading there. But again, I walked out the front door, got in the car, and just started driving. I left the wife and kids home, no kiss, no nothing. I went to work. I guess it's sort of a spiteful way. And what I remember, it was just a beautiful day. September 11th, 2001, that morning was spectacular, which is a good thing because I was a new agent. I'd only left NYPD short time earlier. And my government car was the crappiest car in the group. It was a 1993 Olds Cutlass Calais, had 173,000 miles on it and no air conditioning. So that beautiful day was nice because I could ride it to work with the windows down. Made it most of the way down towards the Southern District. I think it was a little bit north of the Williamsburg Bridge when I got a call from my boss saying, "Hey, Pete, you need to get to the World Trade Center. A plane just hit the North Tower." And in my mind, I'm thinking a small plane, like, a tourist plane or something, had crashed into the building. Never in a million years did I ever envision what I was going to see when I got there.
Everybody thought the same thing, right? Like a Cessna or something, right?
Right. Exactly.
And Pete, to set the stage, the ATF New York Field Division operation was at number 6 World Trade Center on this World Trade Center complex, correct?
Yeah, exactly. And it's weird because I wasn't assigned to that office. I was assigned to our office in Queens. Correct. So I didn't have a parking space at the World Trade Center. So when I visited, I have to do what most New Yorkers do. You drive around like a stalker until you see somebody who looks like they're going to their car. You follow them, hoping they're going to get in their car, and then when they do, you steal that spot.
Over on Vesey Street, right?
Yeah, so I mean, once Jerry called me, I shot across Manhattan. I got off the Brooklyn Bridge exit, weave my way towards Ground Zero, and I parked just north of 7 World Trade on Greenwich Street, facing south. And I remember, like, when I parked, pulling up and looking up at the building. Like, you kind of like when you get too close to a red light, you got to lean forward to look up. And that's why I remember seeing a huge gash in the building and people, waving things to get attention from the ground. And still, at this point, it still didn't dawn on me that this was a commercial airliner. I still thought, that obviously a plane hit the building and the damage was far worse than I thought, but I never thought it would be a plane full of passengers. So I got out of my car, put on the windbreaker that was given to me, and I walked down towards Vesey Street and made a left. And it's when I got to Church Street in Vesey when I saw the gigantic plane engine just sitting there on the ground. Now, those things look huge on a plane. When you see one off a plane on the street, it's massive. And that's when I came to the realization, like, oh my God, this was a passenger plane that hit the building. So many things go through your mind. You're not trained for that kind of stuff either. So you just fill in where you can fill in, So that's how it all started.
So what's going on there on the ground when you get there?
Well, the normal thing that you see with any sort of major incident, some people are leaving, others are staying and watching. So that's what I kind of did. I reverted to the training I had as a cop, which was to keep people moving so that you can get emergency vehicles in and out. So originally, just tried to keep people moving to send them north on Church Street. And then I ran into a detective that I'd worked with, and we decided we were going to go up to the plaza. So we ran up those concrete steps, or marble steps rather, at Vesey Street, and we made it up to the plaza and still did the same thing, just trying to keep people moving. We were there for a short time. I remember seeing a young paramedic or EMT tending to an injured person, made it to almost to the South Tower, and that's when the second plane hit.
What are you guys thinking is going on before that second plane hit? What do you think's going on? Just
well, a couple things. Yeah, a couple things. I thought, again, I'm not the smartest guy. I was like, did the pilot have a heart attack? Like, how the hell does this happen? Like, what? I never in a million years thought terrorism at that point. You get not the sharpest tack. So I'm, just trying to do what I can do. And I remember looking up at the building and saying, wow, that fire is burning pretty intensely. But in the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, they rescued people by helicopter. So I thought, okay, well, those folks above the fire probably get rescued by the helicopters. And I figured the building's going to burn. I mean, I figured that it would just burn and they would rebuild it. Never thought it would collapse. And never in a million years thought, till I'm standing there and the second plane hits, that's when it dawned on me, wow, this is an attack.
Did you hear it coming in too?
I heard something. I was on the other side of the building, and when the blast happened, it was definitely loud. And I remember feeling the heat from the explosion, even though it was many, many, many stories above me. And when I was in the plaza, we were keeping people moving. Stuff rained down, the debris rained down in the plaza. And I remember there was a young EMT I was mentioning earlier. I watched her for a few seconds tending to a patient. That young lady, when I turned around, was mortally injured. She was there on the ground, clearly dead. So still kept trying to see if we could help.
She was struck by debris, I take it.
Yeah, that's the only thing. That's the only conclusion I could come to. And it was terrible to see. So we still tried to keep people moving. There was a lot of people that were injured, trying to get them out of there. And that's about the time when you started seeing people leaping from the North Tower.
Wow,
which was a difficult thing to process.
Could you just imagine the choice that you're making, right? Leaping or staying in that fire, right?
Right. And I thought about that. I was like, how bad can it be that's the better decision? And look, we were all law enforcement. I've seen jumpers before. Usually they either jumped and you show up and you have a crime scene, or they're up on a ledge or something and they just want to be talked off the ledge. I never watched a human being literally plummet to their death. And it was weird because you'd like brace yourself like you were about to get punched in the face just to because you knew you were going to hear them impact the ground. I could still hear those sounds in my head when you remember that day. So many of those images of that day just like burned into your memory, which is, difficult.
Now, have you met up with the other ATF people that were working there at number 6? Now, obviously, they're out of the building by that time. Way before that time.
Yeah, not yet. Now, what happened was after the two jumpers that I saw one jumper hit the ground. The second one hit one of the overhangs, which is, again, a horrible noise. I went back towards that stairwell that I spoke of earlier at Vesey Street, and I ran back downstairs. And that's when I ran into the ASAC. John was one of the two ASACs there. And he grabbed me and said, hey, Pete, I need you to do me a favor. We need to get our ATF people and have them muster up because we need to do a head count. Now, you know how it goes. Normally there's a fire drill.
Right.
You leave and you go meet somewhere. Nobody went to where they were supposed to go. So John, I'm a brand new agent at this point, and John, the ASAC sends me back in. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go back in. But in hindsight, it was really probably a bad choice because I didn't even know all the ATF employees. So I went back in as I was told to. Went this time straight down Church Street. I didn't go back up to the plaza. I didn't think it was safe up there. And when I got down to the old Century 21 store, the discount department store, I ran into Jason Zamoloff and Sal Emilio, two ATF agents, and standing in front of that building. And I was looking towards the Trade Center, and I see a bunch of cops walking towards the plaza, towards the Trade Center. And it's at this point, I'm standing there with Jason and Sal, we're talking, and I see three cops that I knew well. They were friends of mine. John Coughlin, who was a sergeant, Vinny Dans, who helped me the first time I got my ass kicked on Avenue D and East 8th Street, and Walter Weaver, a young cop that I knew when I was a detective. He was a cop, used to come up to the squad room all the time. And I'm watching them walk into the grounds of the World Trade Center. And Vinny Dans looks at me and he's like, hey, what's up? Like because I had the ATF window
right.
And it was a 41,000 person department. So when I left, Vinny, there was no thing. I left ATF. I left the NYPD on a Friday, started with ATF on a Monday. There was no party, no nothing. So Vinny didn't know I left, and I just kind of put my hands up like, yeah, I'm here now. And I remember watching those guys go into the area between the buildings. And that's when Jason Zamoloff grabbed my shoulder with like grabbed it and said only one word: run.
Oh,
I remember looking up, and if you ever see the footage of when the South Tower collapsed, it looked like it was falling like a domino, like towards the East River.
Right.
What happened was the top canted and then it fell. So I just started running north, and I got hit between the shoulder blades with something that probably bounced off the ground and hit me. And so I saw some police cars there, and I saw a fire truck. And I said, my fat ass isn't going to fit under one of those police cars, but I could fit under that fire truck. So I jumped on the ground and rolled under a fire truck. And that truck got hit with some debris, nothing tremendous at that point yet. But then as I'm sitting under the fire truck, all of a sudden the dust cloud comes ripping through. And that dust was like a very gritty, particulate dust.
Wow,
so in my eyes. And I couldn't see. And then you're starting to try to breathe. And you're like, hey, stupid, this was not a good idea going under this truck. You're going to die here. So I climbed out from under the truck and then ran north on Church Street until I.
Was that like choking dust too for people?
Oh, it's horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, like when I got to, there was a place where I heard somebody saying, hey, over here. And it didn't sound like somebody who needed help. It sounded like somebody who was offering help. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face practically. So I went running into that place, which is now, by the way, is a Wolfgang Puck restaurant. And I remember a guy grabbed me and took me to a water fountain, and I was able to throw water in my eyes. And I was coughing so ferociously that I practically threw up. It was just very, very difficult to breathe. And at this point, the building fell. I thought that Jason and Sal were dead. And I knew that John, Vinny, and Walter, I knew that there's no way they got out of the Trade Center. So, I felt I was very fortunate to get out from under that fire truck alive. But I never in a million years thought those guys would still be alive. Luckily, I later ran into Jason and Sal. They did survive. But John, Vinny, and Walter Weaver, they were killed in the Trade Center.
God bless them.
Wow.
Yeah.
The irony of this is that you mentioned, where everybody would go to gather during the fire drill. When we had a couple of bomb scares there, one of the gathering places for all the agency heads and enforcement people was at the Annunciator Wall in the first floor of one of the towers. That's where the command post would be set up, and where everybody would report to. And obviously, turns out to be the worst place to be that day.
Well, New York City's Office of Emergency Management had its second command post at 7th World Trade, which after the South Tower fell first. Later on, the North Tower fell, and then 7th World Trade crumbled. So, all of their plan B was gone.
Yeah. Secret Service was in number 7 World Trade. It was sort of a newer building set a little further away from the other
Right.
complex.
Right. Yeah, another three-letter agency was also based there. We later found out when we couldn't go digging in certain areas, looking for survivors. There were certain areas where you were kind of dissuaded from digging because they were protecting certain stuff that was there.
So at what point do you think about the manner in which you left home and didn't say goodbye?
Well, I'll tell you, so after the South Tower fell, a little bit later on, we found one of our agents who was trapped in a car. She was pregnant, so it wasn't she was pinned in the car. She just didn't want to get out of the car. She was, understandably shaken. So we brought her to the hospital, the Beekman Downtown Hospital. I remember when we got there were all these gurneys and nurses and everything out front, and there were no patients on them. So I mean,
nothing to do. Yeah.
Yeah, and they were actually they almost got like hostile with us, like, hey, where is everybody? And we're like, hey, we brought you one patient. She was fine, thank God. So we went back, this was before the North Tower fell. And then I spent the next several hours there on the scene. I had to go back in to take the radios out of our cars, as you can imagine. They were worried about OPSEC. So go find our government cars, pull out the radios. We did that. Went to an FBI command post. So I worked through that night, went back on scene, helped dig with the firemen. Then went to a command post the following day for a few hours. Then went back to the scene. Pete, it was on the morning of day 3. I get home. I'm covered in dust. By now, Edgar, our SAC, who did a phenomenal job.
Edgar was outstanding that day. Those days.
Yeah, no, he truly heroic, and great lessons to be learned in leadership. So I drive home on day 3 in a brand new car that it still had the sticker on the window, and I pull up in front of my house, and I see my kids are out on the front stoop, and my wife is there as well. And I get out of the car. It's early in the morning, obviously. And the UPS driver sees me. I don't even know this guy. Never met him before in my life. He grabs me and hugs me. And the dust comes off the jacket I was wearing. And he starts crying. And I'm like, all right, this is very moving. But I want to give my wife and kids a hug. So I go and I see my wife. And she's like, I got to take the kids to school. Go inside, grab something to eat, and we'll talk. So she did, and then she came back, and that's when she told me. She said, "Hey, when the tower fell, we knew you were there. I sent my mother to go get the kids from school, and then we sat around the house and waited. They waited for a chaplain to come and tell them I was gone." Yeah. And let me tell you, you want to talk about lessons learned? I learned a lot. I learned, first off, that I was a selfish ass because I got caught up in the mission, and we've all done this. We're law enforcement. We're going to do what it takes, whether it's going to make us bleed or sweat or cry. We're going to do it. When the North Tower fell, my cell phone capabilities went. I mean, that was the cell tower for Lower Manhattan. But there were times when I was in an FBI command post. There was a time where we went to Red Hook, where I got that new car that I spoke of, where the director at the time, Brad Buckles, met with each agent to talk to them. I even took a brief nap there. I could have called home. I got so caught up, and it wasn't that I was even still angry with my wife. But there's so much was going on in my head. But so for 3 days, or 2 days, and that third morning, I show up and I said, "What a selfish ass I am that I never called home." You put the job first. I understand that. We all have done it, but they sat there thinking I was dead for 2 days because I was too selfish to pick up a phone and call home.
Wow.
Big lesson number 1 that I learned on September 11th.
So she wanted to kill you.
She was actually very kind. So she took the kids to school, came back. She made me something to eat. And we spoke. That's when I found out that several more of my friends, she confirmed that Vinny and John and Walter Weaver were presumed dead. Later learned Danny Harlan, who was a cop I worked with, and became a fireman. And a lot of New York City cops, they wanted to trade in their gun and badge for boots and a pillow. Used to be the joke. And I'm not trying to minimize the risk the firemen take, but they worked at 2 days on, 5 days off. A lot of them had lucrative businesses on the side. If I wasn't terrified of heights, I might have thought about it myself. But Steve Driscoll also passed away, Bob Fazio, and then Ray Suarez, who was a transit cop I went through the academy with. He was dead. So seven of my friends gone in one day. I mean, it just was a very, very difficult thing to deal with. I mean, and I've lost friends in the line of duty before. Al Bosch had a heart attack while we were doing a search warrant. I wasn't present for the warrant. But 31 years old, drops dead when he was trying to breach the door. Paul Heidelberger, another guy I worked with, good guy, breaking up a bar fight on Bell Boulevard, got shot in the throat. And because the bouncer wanted to break up the fight, and Paul beat him to it. Imagine that. So the bouncer shoots him, and as he's laying there, picks him up by his hair, shoots him in his head, and kills him. John Williamson, another good. You might remember the story. They dropped a bucket of tape compound from a roof when he was he was helping maintain order during the arrest. He's killed. I was there when Hector Fontanez took his last breath after he got shot up in the 4-7. So I mean, I've lost friends in the line of duty, but to lose 7. It was just incredibly difficult to cope with. And I went through some horrible survivor's guilt. I mean, I tried out for the emergency services unit with John Coughlin, John Coughlin and Vinnie Dans. Because, at the time they were, the Housing Authority Police Department was going to start its own emergency service unit. And I was a plainclothes cop at the time. And so I went through the shooting test and the breathing into the tube, all the physical fitness tests. And then day one of the training, they take you up to the Verrazano Narrows Bridge.
Yeah, right.
Right. Well, okay. So they put the belt on you, and then you climb up, and you go up the tube to the top of the tower. So I get out of the van, and the trucks go by, and the bridge is bouncing, and you hear the wind whipping through the cables. And I look down. It's like 50 stories to the water. And then I look up, and it's like another 50 stories. It's like, I'll see you guys later. I just got back in the van. I just completely said, I'm not doing this. So, but the fact that those guys, that they were killed, and I almost felt like, had I had the balls to go up that bridge, maybe I would have been there with them. So, I mean, you all these things go through your head.
And not to mention your community lost people, right? I mean, it was just everywhere you turn, there were people that either you knew directly or indirectly. And, like to me, what I always found to be, so difficult to sort of process was the cars that were left at the train stations because, or the park and rides where people didn't come back to get them. And it's very little things like that were hard to process.
Yeah. It was weird in Manhattan, next to the fire trucks, you would see black Oxfords. And I guess the firemen, because they would take off their shoes and put on fire boots. So you'd see these lined up shoes, same concept. You're like, wow, these guys
never came back.
Never made it back to put on their shoes. It was just difficult. It's funny because I mentioned our SAC at the time, Edgar. Obviously I wanted to just go back and dig for my friends. So even the day when I spoke to my wife, we had a very good conversation. We made amends. I was going to go back to Ground Zero, and I did. Edgar came up with this edict. He goes, listen, hey, folks, we are an investigative agency. We're open for business. You are not going to be down there every day digging for survivors. We have cases to do. We have cases to prosecute. Now he made a concession that, hey, you can go down there one day a week with the government car, because that's the only way you can get in or out was with a car with lights and sirens. He goes, and if you want to go down there on your days off, that's fine. But we're open for business. Let me tell you, I was pretty pissed off because I had, like I said, 7 friends dead that were friends. Obviously, 23 New York City cops and 37 Port Authority. I mean, again, the community. I was like, you got to be kidding me. You're worried about cases and we got to go dig for our people. I was pissed off. I even called the NYPD and I was going to try to get reinstated because I felt like I abandoned my old friends. That changed as time went on when I would see these ATF guys there on their days off and along with other agencies as well, that they showed their true colors. I was like, all right, I'm where I need to be. These people are here putting their best foot forward, trying to do the right thing and digging for bodies and digging for survivors. And this went on for months. So I obviously decided to not leave and go to the NYPD. But, when you look at the health concerns that are afflicting so many survivors, you wonder how many lives did Edgar save by minimizing our time down there. I mean, people still went there, but I mean, if we were there 24/7, 7 days a week, I would imagine that things would have been a lot worse. And look, I had some health issues, had lung cancer. We lost a couple of agents from my group. Some retired and died of cancer. Bill Sheldon, young guy, died. I mean, God knows it could have been worse. That perhaps, so you never know what's going on in a leader's mind when they make decisions. And sometimes you need to. I'm not saying that Edgar could have predicted that, But sometimes people make decisions that are tough decisions that, when they're analyzed years later, turn out to be the right decision. That was clearly the right decision.
Leadership, right?
Right.
I remember the grandness of like just the immensity of like Ground Zero, and you didn't see it at first when you were first coming in. It wasn't until you sort of got past the buildings, and all of a sudden this huge area opened up, and there was the blinding lights and the smells, and and of course the people and the camaraderie. It was a war zone, but there were so many people that were working like as a team that I've never seen anything like that before.
No, hey, let me tell you something. People ask me, like during 9/11, hey, were you scared? No, I wasn't. And it's not because I'm a brave guy. I'm not a brave guy. It's that there was so much going on that your mind just really couldn't process it. So, and it's like, when you look at the magnitude of what was happening, you try to figure out, what do we do? Well, you do what you can right then and there. I mean, that's basically how you handle that situation. But to your point, I mean, look, DEA agents, FBI agents, ATF agents, everybody was there pulling together. Firemen, there were cops and firemen from all over the country, some from outside the country as time went on. But I remember, like, on the other side of West Street, you have the World Financial Center, which had that huge atrium. I remember during day 2, while I was there digging, walking through there, and it would look like a war zone. And it was weird at night. You had those blinding lights that you pointed out, and the dust still kind of hung in the air. So it kind of had this kind of hellish look to it. It's kind of very creepy. But I remember like under that giant broken atrium, there were not the tables, but those chairs you sit in where you put your face in the chair. There were people giving massages. There was a canine, like, emergency operating room almost set up where they were taking care, because the dogs would go in there, they'd burn their paws on the girders because the heat would come from the fires underground. So, I mean, to your point, you had people coming together from all different walks of life to just do the right thing. The sense of unity there was unlike anything I've ever seen. And it's, we talk about never forget 9/11. I wish we wouldn't forget that sense of unity from 9/12, candidly.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, I'll never forget 9/11, but I'll certainly always remember September 12th, because it's those memories, frankly, that when the bad memories come in from September 11th, I do my best to push them out with the good stuff I saw from the 12th on.
But it was,
I
but it was the best in people came out after the event. After the event.
Yes. To me, seeing cops from distant parts of the country directing traffic in New York City, right? That was just an incredible feeling. And just the way that the support was from the public, right, was just incredible.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you remember, if you the way in and out was, you had to come down West Street, and I believe Canal Street was where the cutoff was. When you would come and go, there were people that were lined up. I mean, thousands of people just north of Canal Street. And
waving flags, screaming, right? Yes.
Yeah, throwing water bottles, not at you, but to you, handing you food. I mean, so I remember there were times I'd leave Ground Zero just beaten down and tired from digging for hours, passing the buckets up and down the pile. And when you see those people and the gratitude, it was invigorating. It was like you wanted to turn around and just go back in. Because, look, I was a cop for New York in a long time, in the Bronx, where police weren't very appreciated. You very rarely got a thanks, and you didn't expect one. But the way the community came together, the energy that came out of that was just incredibly moving. I mean, I don't know what other word I would use, but it just gave you energy, made you feel that you were doing something so vitally important, because obviously we were, but then it was appreciated, so deeply.
Where did you live then, Pete? Where did you live then? How far did you have to get? How did you get back and forth to your house?
Yeah, I lived right in the shadows of Yonkers Raceway, actually, at that time. And I drove the government car in. So I took, went down to Major Deegan, across the Third Avenue Bridge, then down the FDR Drive normally, and then
So at some point, that all those roads had to be kept open. They must have been pretty much clogged at one point, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. And the only way down the West Side Highway was strictly restricted to emergency vehicles.
Correct.
So, believe it or not, my drive to work after 9/11 was the best commute I've ever had in New York because the road was wide open. But normally, I think it's only like 16 miles from door to door. That would be a 2-hour drive.
Correct.
So yeah, it made things interesting. And I know they shut down Manhattan on September 11th. I really didn't get a chance to experience that because I never left the area of Ground Zero till the morning of the 13th.
Well, I think for all of us, time just stood still that day. It was the longest day of my life. When you think about when the incidents occurred, right? 8:30, 8:15 in the morning. Things just really slowed to a crawl. That day for me seemed like a week because I remember being on the Jersey side and at 10 o'clock at night being at Liberty State Park, and it was lined with ambulances from all over the state waiting for boats to be bringing the injured over. And of course, they never came. And I remember looking across the Hudson River, and it was a war zone. It was pitch black from a line of demarcation, with the exception of fires burning in buildings, high rises there, right around Ground Zero.
Mm-hmm.
So surreal that this was actually on U.S. soil that this occurred, but the day was just it just seemed like an eternity that day. There was just so much going on in terms of the what your brain was taking in, and the magnitude and the immensity of it. And I was on the outside looking in from the Jersey side, right? And we had no plan either. Our radios all got knocked out because all our repeaters were on top of the World Trade Center. So we lost all communications. Nobody knew where to go, what to do, who we were fighting. Was this threat on U.S. soil? Nobody knew.
Right.
And to your point about we all had a job to do, and the leaders at the time did exactly what you described, like focused people back on what their mission was, whatever it was at that given moment, until things started to right themselves, like what the heck was going on here. That was just such an immense event, and I hope to God we never experience something like that again.
Yeah, I'll tell you what was very surreal. When the towers fell, obviously the dust covered everything. There was a quietness that came along with that. Like once the towers came down, and it's weird because I speak about this from time to time. I think we should never forget that day. But you ever been outside like after a heavy snowfall? There's like a silence that comes along with that snowfall.
Right.
That's exactly how it was down at Ground Zero with all that dust. So there were people walking. Nobody was talking. Everybody was just kind of walking. They were all zoned out. But like fire trucks would go by, and you wouldn't hear them. Like police cars would go by because that dust gave that eerie silence to that area, and that silence would occasionally be broken when the fighter planes would go by. But yeah, to your point, Ray, it was very like eerie, just kind of scene, almost like something out of a movie. And while it was going on, that's exactly how it felt. It didn't feel like I was even physically there. I felt like I was watching it on some sort of a screen because it just didn't seem real. It was probably was a good thing that it didn't seem real while it was going on.
And it was unrecognizable too. I mean, the aftermath was simply, it was hard to orient yourself when you were looking at that from afar.
Yeah.
So Pete, that was 20 years ago. You think of it every day. You've done a lot to sort of give back, and I know you You've spoken at the 9/11 Museum on many occasions, but what have you learned from that experience that you're passing on to folks as it relates to hope and resiliency and
There's a few things.
and leadership?
Yeah, there's a few things. And one of them I spoke about is like, hey, sometimes when leaders make decisions, respect the decision. You might not agree with it, but you got to respect that decision. And if you're that leader, be willing to make those decisions and stand by them. But at the same time, treat your people fairly. Like, John, the ASAC who sent me down into ground zero, I might not have come out of ground. So he had to make that decision. I get it. And we have to make decisions sometimes that put people in harm's way. But, if you treat people fairly and God forbid something does happen to them, right, at least you can live with yourself. There's no need to be a bully.
Right.
Some of the other things I've learned. Look, I lost some good friends, and for some reason I was spared. If I have an opinion about something, I will always be respectful. But if I see something that's not being done right or it's foolish or stupid, I'm going to say something. And I see in leadership, there's some folks who will just say yes to anything because, they don't want anything to stick to them. I call them the Velcrophobics. I'm not necessarily, I don't want anything to stick to me because I'm worried about that next step in my career. I would be doing a disservice to those friends that I lost on that day if I held my tongue and didn't speak out if I saw something stupid or foolish happening, because there's a reason why some of us got out of there, and to not live to our fullest potential is a slap in the face to the reason that we're still here. That's another thing. The other thing, hey man, taking care of family. Look, you can give the job 100% of your effort. Shame on you if you give them 100% of your time. Years later, I wound up, like I told you before, I found out I had, lung cancer. I remember coming out of surgery and I was looking at my wife and daughter. My son was, away doing Coast Guard business, so he wasn't there. And I remember looking at them and, you're processing a million things, don't know if it's spread, waiting for the biopsy results, so you're shitting bricks, for lack of a better term. And I remember looking at my wife and daughter and saying, I have all of these great memories, all of these great cases I worked, and I volunteered to work Christmas and New Year's. And I didn't have, it's not that I didn't love them immensely, but I never made the time to make those great memories with them. So another leadership lesson learned is tell your people to take care of themselves and to take care of their families, because if you're not right at home, you're not going to be right at work. And the other thing is, hey man, look, I have you, if you work for me for 20 years or whatever, as long as I have you. But I also have to be aware that at some point when you retire, you're going to be with your family. The job is going to go on without you. So to encourage people to take care of things on the home front as a leader, I think are so vitally important. I remember when Hurricane Irma came through South Florida, there was a Category 5 hurricane as it was coming in. There were a lot of concerns. Some of my people, they didn't live in houses that they could withstand a Cat 5 hurricane. We even had some external partner agencies that were Cat 4 buildings, Cat 3 buildings, said, hey, can we run our command posts in your office space? I was like, sure. I opened up the doors because, again, lessons learned from 9/11. I'm going to take care of my people. I had agents. I had their families. I had a bearded dragon. I had parrots. I had dogs, cats sleeping in our office space. We cleared out all the sensitive stuff. We had cots, air mattresses, because I was going to take care of my people. And it was because of the stuff I learned during 9/11 from Edgar and from others about the importance of taking care of people and not necessarily worrying sometimes about the bureaucracy. Had I asked for permission to do that, I'm sure the lawyers would have said, no way. So I didn't ask.
Wow.
Yep. Wow. That's right.
So what have you done for the 9/11 Museum?
Well, I speak at some of their leadership programs, and mostly for ATF. But I also have gone there and I gave a personal history. They have a woman there. Well, they have several who they sit and they record your story, and it's to tell the story. So it's recorded and documented. But it was amazing. Like when I gave my presentation. The historian, and I posted something about this on LinkedIn recently. The woman who was taking my testimonial, I noticed, like, as I was talking about the EMT I spoke of earlier, I noticed that she had tears streaming down her face. Wow. And so I was like, I knew it wasn't because my story is that moving. Here's probably somebody who's heard from, hundreds, if not thousands of people who were there at Ground Zero. That's what her job is. And so she interrupts me. She goes, would you remember the EMT if you saw her? And I was like, I think so. And within seconds, she was able to get, the name of this EMT and a photograph. And it dawned on me at that time, like, think about that. This person has interviewed thousands of people. There were nearly 3,000 people killed on that day. She knew exactly who I was. Think about the presence of mind and how much passion you have to have for what you do to be able to put those puzzle pieces together on the fly.
Wow.
So I was very inspiring. And the nice thing was apparently they obviously knew that young lady lost her life, but they didn't know exactly where or how. So she was able to put those puzzle pieces together. And my understanding is that she was able to communicate that to the family, which is a great thing. But I mean, this is 17 years later that this interview took place. So, and I've also given that presentation, which is, I call it 9/11, Surviving 9/11 Leadership and Resilience. I've given for a couple of other organizations as well. Because again, it's all with the whole never forget, train of thought. So if I can help people remember that day in a dignified way without pointing fingers at anybody, I'm happy to do it.
Wow.
What are you planning to do on the 20th anniversary? If it's personal, I get it. What are you planning to do?
I'm going to spend the time with my wife and my kids. My kids are both grown now. They're both federal agents. So I plan on spending the time with them. Going back to what I said earlier, I missed a lot of opportunities to make good memories. It's a somber day for all of us. It's a tough day to get through. So it's a little bit easier when we get through it together.
Yeah.
So, Pete, you're the Deputy Assistant Director of Training and Professional Development now at ATF.
Right.
And so what do you tell the young agents in the academy?
Well, I remind them of the importance of taking care of family, a few other things. One of the things we do now is we actually have a program that we put on at the 9/11 Memorial Museum, and they're a great partner for our folks to remind them of what happened that day. And it's interesting. The feedback has been great because people who go through that museum come out inspired. And that's a good place to go when you're kind of burnt out and you really don't understand why you're doing this job anymore, because you walk out of there remembering exactly why you took the oath. But I go down there and I remind them of the importance of being humble and being a good, a good follower, as well as even if you're a GS-13 or whatever your title is, you're a leader too. You have to be out there representing the agency. You may just be running a case with certain partner organizations, and the importance of being humble and treating people right. So that's the stuff that I talk to new agents about. But it's interesting. Recently, I go down there, and the average age that we hire people is around 30-ish. Pretty soon, we'll be hiring people maybe 2 years from now, some of the younger agents that weren't even born on September 11th.
Right.
It's kind of difficult to process that. Again, here I was a brand new agent on 9/11, and now here I am retirement eligible. So it happened a career ago.
Wow.
It's probably the way that we think of Pearl Harbor. None of us were there, but to us, it's something way back in history. But I bet you, talking to the people after that, some of the discussions would be very similar to what you're talking about today.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you who I wish would be a little bit more genuine about it is, and it's where I get in trouble. Some of our elected officials, people love to use that never forget 9/11, but a lot of them clearly act like they've forgotten or don't care about it. Again, the togetherness, the sense of unity after that was important. If I were an elected official, I would try to rebuild that sense of purpose and unity.
Absolutely. Aspire to create that, right?
Right. And instead they tear it down, which I think is so unfortunate. Because, look, when this country needs to come together, it does. Right? And if you look at what we accomplished after 9/11 down there, and you think of what we could accomplish if we were always in that mindset, it would be astounding. But instead, for the purpose of votes or for, for talking points or for whatever, they just, they don't pull together. They divide. And that's really unfortunate. It's the opposite of leadership.
So Pete, I think you gave me a great segue into this. When I did the introduction about you, and I wrote it down here so I'd get it right, I stated that leadership comes in many shapes and sizes, and it rears its head in times of crisis and times of peace. It's not about popularity. It's about courage to face the unknown and inspire positivity. What does that mean to you?
Well, look, I think we should always strive to do the right thing. And I think that's where positivity comes from. People respect when you do something right, even if they may not like it at that moment. And look, through the years, I've seen some things that weren't exactly right. There was obviously, I testified in front of Congress when something went wrong at my own agency. There were several instances where I saw instances where folks were wrongfully convicted, unfortunately, and I got 8 innocent people out of jail because I felt that it was my duty to do the right thing. It wasn't to stir the pot or to point fingers at a previous investigation that wound up arresting the wrong person. It was like, hey, I have a duty to do what's right. And I think that's what the most important thing is doing the right thing, having honor and integrity. And look, you're going to piss some people off if you do that, because people don't like to have their mistakes highlighted. But, look, if I make a mistake, I'm going to be the first one to apologize, and I'm going to be the first one to own it, and I'm going to be the first one to try to make it right. And that's, I think, all we can do. And if everybody did that, I think the world would be a better place. And I'm not saying I get it right all the time, but I'm certainly going to try to.
Is that where the courage comes in? And I say that because so many people are focused on the popularity piece and they miss out on the courage.
Absolutely. Look, doing the right thing is not always the easy thing. It did not go well for me after I testified in front of Congress. That turned into a couple of year fight. Candidly, even some of these situations where people were in jail, the district attorney's office, there were accusations, there were fingers being pointed. I lost friends, because some of those cops that made those arrests I was friends with, they didn't want to hear that I wasn't second guessing their investigation. I just had someone providing me evidence that showed that, that the case should have went somewhere else. So, I'm following the leads. I'm doing what, I was trained to do. But there were people who weren't happy with that. But at the same time, I got to look myself in the mirror. A clear conscience is a great thing to have, I think.
That's right, Peter. You could fool everybody but the man in the mirror, Peter.
Yeah, true. So that's why, I say, if you're always doing the right thing, then when you're shaving in the morning, you're not going to hate yourself when you're looking at what you see.
No.
So what did we miss? One final question. What did we miss that if you were us, you would ask you about 9/11, about resiliency, about leadership?
Yeah. Look, what would I have done differently might be a question. There's some things I regret that day when that young the young EMT was injured. I never went and physically checked to see if she was alive or dead. She looked like she was deceased, and there were things coming off the building. There were people jumping off the building. It wasn't a safe place to be. Do I regret not having perhaps tried? Sure. Yeah. There's things, you did what you could. Doesn't mean you got everything right. And like I said, there's so much happening that you took one task at a time. But yeah, I don't know. I certainly wouldn't have jumped onto that fire truck. I think that was a stupid mistake, but it was the decision I made at the time. So yeah.
Well, the other Pete.
Yes, sir.
Close it up, pal. Just
well,
I got goosebumps thinking about this.
We look back on the day, and certainly it's a day of tragedy, a day of sorrow. But I think what we've talked about today was during and after it brought out the best in people. And they weren't all that much different than us, but they represented the best of us.
Yeah. Hey, Pete, thank you for coming on the RF Factor. Appreciate your story. Appreciate your leadership.
Thanks.
Have a great
Always
night.
good to see you guys. Thank you.
God bless.
I told him his goal was to make you cry, and I think he succeeded.
Pretty close. Pretty close. My glasses are steamed up a little bit.
They yeah, I think we needed to have him on. This is an important story. Can't believe it's 20 years. I mean, I look around my office here. I have mementos from that day and from that time all over the place, like it was yesterday. And it'll always be at my core. And I think we have a duty to make sure that people know. And you brought it up about Pearl Harbor. And we weren't alive for that, but
Right.
there was a duty for us to never forget. And it's the same thing here because
Right.
so much to be thankful for based on what occurred after the wake of that tragic event. So,
Wow. And here we are 20 years later. It's like it's incomprehensible, really. But
yeah. All right, Pete. Hey, thank you. And I'll talk to you soon.
One last thing. I think that there are going to be many wives and husbands and family members that are going to stand up and cheer when they watch this.
Yeah, good point.
When they listen to Pete talking about one of the deeply personal lessons that he learned, I think that there's a lot of people that are going to be commenting on this particular episode.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Pete. Thank you. Have a great
All right.
night.
You too, Ray.
I'll speak to you soon.
Yeah, later.